Hello and welcome to our first season recap episode of the off-season on the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. You'll see the episode number for this in the description, but we're recording these in advance, so you'll see it in the future. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and as usual, I'm joined by Joe Meade. Tonight, Joe and I will be starting off with the 14th place finishers in the Big Ten, and unfortunately for you, Joe, that is your Michigan Wolverines. We're going in reverse order of the standings, so these will get better as they come out. Obviously, the coach was fired at the end of the year, but overall thoughts on the Michigan Wolverines basketball season.
Complete and total disaster. That's not even said out of emotion, Sean. It's said out of pure fact. This is the worst team since the 60s. My dad wasn't even alive for that team in the 60s, and he's well over 60, so that should tell you all you need to know. I think the only highlight this winter for Michigan fans was the hockey team and the football team winning the national title. Normally, basketball's coupled in there somewhere. 2 conference wins, Sean. 2 wins in 2024, as many as the Michigan football team. If that does not say it all, I do not know what does.
Yeah, I think it really started after last year, Joe, when the team made the NIT and you lose 2 players to the NBA and your best player to the transfer portal to Kansas, and that would be Hunter Dickinson. Now, Juwan did acquire some talent, maybe not enough to get over the loss of Bufkin, Jet Howard, and Hunter Dickinson, but Namari Burnett comes in, Trey Jackson comes in. Those were the only incoming transfers, right?
Yeah, Namari, Kamwa, Olivier
and Kamwa too. So, I mean, 2 of those players were pretty good, but it kind of all went off the rails pretty quickly. Now, obviously, the Juwan health situation was a little worse than they made it out to be. He, had a heart surgery in the summer, wasn't able to coach really at all until the season started. Then Martelli was the coach. Then Howard was an observer to an assistant coach to the head coach. Now, I think that whole situation would have been handled differently looking back on it, but it was just hard to really get going when you had so much change in the first coaching seat.
Yeah, Sean, I think that was a mistake not only of Juwan or Martelli. I think it was the administration as a whole. I think Juwan is a really good guy. I really do. I think no one at Michigan, I know he had a lot of issues interpersonally. I know the Wisconsin incident and, some of the incidents in the dust-up with John Sanderson in December, but often around Michigan circles, widely seen as a really good guy. Maybe a guy who was in way over his head toward the end, which is what we saw. And I think he even admitted to that in the interview he did with The Athletic and Brendan Quinn, which is a really good piece if you do subscribe. I think it gives a lot more insight into the program than I could give, or even most of the insiders at Michigan could give you. But Sean, it's the biggest part of that, too, that you mentioned with the acquisition of talent. It's the same old story. Caleb Love committed to Michigan the same way Terrence Shannon did, and Michigan admissions could not let him in. Now, a lot of Michigan fans hoorah at that. I really think that's pretty stupid. Like, if you're a Michigan fan, why would you hoorah at that? I don't care if you're an alum. I'm an alum, too. I do not think a degree is devalued because Caleb Love, who also went to UNC, and Terrence Shannon, who went to Texas Tech, they come in and, God forbid, they might get a Michigan degree. Like, I really don't care. It's pretty short-sighted of people to do that, in my opinion, but we could debate that another time. Jawad never had an issue getting talent. It's just if the talent could actually come in, and unfortunately, this was quite another case of it, and this was the death blow. I think Terrence Shannon not coming started the downward, maybe not triggered it, but that was part of the downward trajectory, and Caleb Love not coming just worsened the curve in a way. So, let's get to that schedule, Sean.
Yeah, it seemed like Michigan was kind of doomed to fail from the start, Joe, with all the things that happened before the ball was tipped, but it started off pretty solid for the Wolverines. A 3-0 start with pretty impressive wins over UNC Asheville, Youngstown State, and then most notably a 16-point road win at Rick Pitino's St. John's. Now, was there another game that was as wild as this one when you look back at the season, because St. John's actually turned out to be a pretty good team, just missed out in the tournament. But Michigan smoked them at the Garden. And you look at those offensive numbers early on for the YouTube viewers, the Michigan offense was humming early on in the season.
Yeah, not to mention, Sean, another game that wasn't a game, I guess, scrimmage. Michigan had beat Marquette in a scrimmage by 10 points. Start the season at Marquette. That doesn't matter. There were no fans. It was a closed-door scrimmage meeting. I don't really know. I think the only people who would know if that was a true result are the ones who played in it. Or, hell, it might not have even been played for all I know, based on the Michigan team I saw. But, Sean, that game at St. John's, Rick Pitino even said after, I don't know if there's many teams in the Big Ten better than Michigan. They were all better than Michigan, Rick. I love you, but
And
no.
by quite a margin, too.
Yeah, there were quite a lot more teams better than Michigan. So, really, after that game, Sean, a lot of people, the hashtag Rake Michigan became viral for a bit. Doug McDaniel had a phenomenal game, dribbling through the patented Petito press. Damari Burnett scored 20 points in the first half. This looked like a team, and at the time, Michigan State fans were apoplectic. Not only was their football team awful, Michigan's basketball team was going to be better than their basketball team. So that lasted for all of 3 days. Michigan laid an egg at home to Long Beach State. Sabonis, or whatever the heck his name was on Long Beach State.
Tishonis, but yeah.
Tishonis, yes. He quickly derailed those hopes. I think the most telling side of that game was Long Beach State dominating the second half. Then Michigan cut the lead to about 2 with less than a minute. And the same way their season ended against Rutgers in the Big Ten tournament in 23 and ended against Long Beach State. They tipped in the ball off a missed free throw. It's unheard of how Michigan lets that happen twice in a calendar year. But it happened. Lose that game, lose 2 of 3 in Atlantis. Then, better yet, they lose a game at Oregon. They had won twice, practically. Letting in a buzzer beater 3 to have it be tied, then a buzzer beater 3 at the end of overtime. In a non-shocking way to everyone, lost at home to Indiana in a game where they traded leads, and no one really in Chrysler believed that Michigan was going to win that game, and they did it. And then Iowa. That was probably the highlight of the year besides St. John's. Winning there. And at the time, they get to 5-5, beat Eastern the next Saturday, get to 6-5. But then all the reports come out. Jawan is back on the sideline, but has a dust-up with longtime strength coach who's there in the Beeline era, John Sanderson. And boy, all the optics of the program start looking worse and worse and worse. And then couple that at 6-5, had 2 quad-1 wins at the time. Their season died, not in February, not in March, not even in January. In Charlotte on December 19th to the Florida Gators. A game, again, Michigan
They had won
led by 3. Yep, they had won twice. They could have won in regulation. They led by 3 with 20 seconds left. Florida misses a shot. Michigan fails to foul, fails to get the rebound because Lord knows they weren't getting that. Florida kicks it out, ties it for a 3. Go to a second overtime and lose by 5. After that shot, Michigan won a total of 2 games. So think about that. They start at 6-5, went to 8-24. We're 2-19 following the Eastern Michigan game.
Yeah, it got bad quick. They 1-2 in Atlantis. Memphis was good early on before they fell off, and Texas Tech was a tournament team. That was okay, but the Oregon and Florida away losses that they had won were the killers for me, I think. And then, they go on Christmas break, and when they come back, Joe, we had, raised the alarm bells before the McNeese game even tipped that the Cowboys are going to come into this game expecting to win, and they did just that.
They dominated.
From my recollection, they never were going to lose that game.
No.
They ended up winning. They were like 31-3 in the regular season. And then once Michigan hit the under 500 mark, it was only downhill from there. They did beat Chris Holtmann in Ohio State on January 15th. That team was certainly much changed before Jake Diebler was the interim and eventually hired. They did get Wisconsin at home, Joe, on February 7th. That was when Wisconsin couldn't play basketball for, I think they had a 5-game losing streak.
Yep.
And then after that, it was a lot of second half meltdowns where Michigan actually performed pretty well in the first half, all things considered. And then after that, they lose out, finish 8-24, as you said. Juwan Howard ends up getting fired, and Dusty May is the next head coach. Now, we are going to format all of these season recap videos pretty similar. I don't think there's much to go over in the conference season. They were out of more games that they were in, just 2 wins, obviously extremely disappointing. There's not any standout performances to go after, other than the 2 wins, which unfortunately were flukes, kind of in the highest degree. You beat 2 teams that were way better than you during the season, and probably, Ohio State was very close to the tournament. Wisconsin was in the tournament. But other than that, worst conference season that we'll probably see in a while from any team in the Big Ten, even the new look 18-team Big Ten. But, Joe, Section 4 of these recaps will be the biggest performers on the season. This might be tough, but there were a couple of Michigan players who did perform pretty well this year.
I think Terrence Williams really took a step up for his personal game. His personal game got really good. He was the team player. He kept probably that locker room afloat along with guys like Namari Burnett and Jalen Llewellyn. I think Olivier Cabo, too, even though he went down with injury in early
He was
February.
a pretty solid player, though.
He was really solid. But I think he did what he did at Tennessee, which was still really good. But Terrence Williams took a step up. His three-point game got a lot better and really limited the turnovers. There'd be times where he'd revert back to junior year Terrence, which was not good, but he really did step up. He did enter the transfer portal, unfortunately. Still a slight chance he comes back, but I do think the way he played this year opened a lot of options for him, whether that's at Michigan, but likely at another program. So good on him. Terrace Reed, another guy, really stepped up his game, did start, had a lot of turnovers, a lot of growing pains, but going to UConn now, I do not think he's going to have the same growing pains he did at Michigan. It's going to be interesting to see what Danny Hurley, the carpenter, does with him. And really excited for him personally. I think a guy who's on 2 of the worst Michigan teams in the modern era. And I think he does deserve to win some basketball games now, and he will certainly do that in Storrs, Connecticut. But, Sean, anyone for you that stood out?
I think the only other thing that we need to talk about, Joe, is the Doug McDaniel situation.
Oh,
you alluded to it earlier. He was awesome early on in the year, looking like an all Big Ten guard, carving up defenses that ended up, ranking out pretty good at the end of the year. And then come his academic issues, a 6-game road game only suspension. One of the more odd situations, really, kind of all time in college sports. Llewellyn was playing way too many minutes in road games. He's coming off an injury. Then Doug's back in there for 37 minutes when they're at home. We're probably not going to see another situation like this, and I think it does need to be said. Just a thought on that. We did hit it many times during the season, and ultimately he did transfer out too, and he's headed to play for Jerome Tang, Kansas State. But Doug McDaniel did raise his stock, all things considered, this year.
Yeah, it is a shame, Sean, that happened. And talk about a guy in November. He's one of the better players in the Big Ten overall, really. He averaged there was a time where he scored 20 points a game. And I really think that academic issue, he did play hard at home, but who cares? He's playing 1 basketball game a week, so it didn't really matter. It is a shame that 3 of the top 4 contributors on this team are not going to return to the program, being Kabwa, Doug, and Terrace. And perhaps Terrence Williams, too, doesn't return. The only one confirmed coming back is Namari Burnett. Will Shetter gave some points off the bench. There'd be times where he'd be brilliant. He did improve his shot and his post ability. Still needs to learn to not foul. But overall, Sean, those are very little bright spots in a season full of darkness. So, yeah, there's no other way to put it. They definitely need. as of this reporting. But the fact they wanted to burn the whole thing down and start over should speak volumes as to how bad this season was. But no, Sean, those were my closing thoughts. I think there's no other way to put it. The season died in Charlotte the moment they gave up that three-pointer to go to the second overtime in Florida. There is zero debate about that. And if you want to look at where Michigan's program died under Juwan Howard, it wasn't the UCLA game in 21. It wasn't the Villanova loss in 2022. Truthfully, Sean, it was probably February the 11th, 2023, when they blew that 11-point lead they had at home against Indiana with 7 minutes left, and then a 7-point lead they had with 2 minutes left. And then from there, I don't think Michigan won one close game after that. They won one game against Wisconsin at the end of the 23 season, and one close game against Ohio State this year when Ohio State hadn't won a road game in over a year. So that 2-25 stretch in those close games, that's ultimately going to be Jawan's battle, Waterloo, battle of Stalingrad, whatever battle you want to think of where they lose. That's what I would attribute it to. But I could say no more without losing my cool and going on an X-rated rant. So I've said my piece.
Dusty May is the coach, and when he fills out his roster, we will do a season preview episode sometime in the late summer or early fall. So, Joe, last segment of this shouldn't take very long. I think there's one way to go here for a letter grade for Michigan's season. It's got to be an F.
Maybe it's an E if you're in one of those schools that doesn't like giving Fs. But whether you're in a PC school or not, E, F doesn't matter. This was an F on all accounts. If you're an E school, I'm gonna burst your eardrums. It was an F, 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 and there could be a lot of other ways to interpret that. But we have a lot of kids listening, so I'm not going to do that.
Yep, the F is going to be the worst possible grade that we can give teams this year, and that's what's going to have to happen with Michigan. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this season recap. Be sure to like and subscribe and tune in as we get to some other ones. We'll see you next time.